Duty, honor, country dictate what you ought to be, what you can be, what you will be.
The destiny of man is not measured by material computations. When great forces are on the move in the world, we learn we're spirits, not animals.
Now we are the masters of our fate.
Howdy, gents. Welcome back to another episode of the Wolf and Iron Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Yarbrough, founder and curator of wolfandiron.com. And fellas, I'm so glad you're here. I really am glad you're here. It means a lot to me to be able to share awesome conversations like the one coming up here with Ken Coleman with you guys, and then to hear feedback from you. When you guys send me a note on social media or you send me an email and you say, Mike, man, that the podcast is just is making a big difference in my life. It's making a big difference in my marriage, and I love you sharing the things that are going on with your businesses, and it's just inspirational. And guys, that's it for me. That's what it's all about. That's why I do this. This is from the heart. This is a mission kind of minded thing that I'm doing here with Wolf and Iron. And you guys get to be a part of this, not only by listening, but also by sharing it with other guys out there. And as you know, you've probably experienced this in your own life. I hope you have. But when the man changes, when you change, not only are your children impacted and your wife impacted, but your grandchildren, possibly your great-grandchildren. We're talking legacy stuff here. And here's how legacies are changed. Hey, Joe, have you heard about wolfandiron.com? You got to go check it out. Listen to the podcast. You're not going to regret it. That's it. And boom, you've just made an impact in some guy's life. And we all need that. We all need that. I can't think of the number of times when men have just recommended something to me, just, small little thing here, didn't really mean much to them, and it's made a tremendous impact in my life. And so I appreciate you guys getting back with me, but also when you share this and get it in front of the guys who really need to hear it. Now, my guest today is Ken Coleman. He's the author of The Proximity Principle. If you're not familiar with Ken, you can go back and listen to a previous podcast that I had with him a little over a year ago, actually. Lots changed, actually, in my life since that year. We talk about that a little bit on the podcast. But Ken Coleman is the host of the Entre Leadership podcast, Dave Ramsey's under Dave Ramsey's kind of group there. And he's also the host of the Ken Coleman Show. He's just a fantastic guy for asking questions and just diving in deep, really digging in and kind of drawing people out. He's just fantastic at it. And even if you don't consider yourself an entrepreneur kind of person, a business owner kind of person, you're going to be a leader in some part of your life. I hope that you have a desire to be a leader in some area of life. And part of being a leader is just asking good questions and being able to draw people out and really dig in areas that they have a hard time navigating themselves. And Ken does a great job of that. So I always recommend go listen to everything he's doing, because you're going to learn so much just about asking questions. And he does a great job also about making things very clear, making things very poignant. And the Proximity Principle book does it very, very well. So we've all heard that you're the average of the 5 people that you hang around with, right? The Jim Rohn kind of quote. We've probably heard that at some point in our life. The challenge is that we don't really have an example of who are the people that we need to be in proximity with. Who are the people we really need to surround ourselves with? They're good people, yeah, but what do they look like? What are the different characteristics they need to have? And he also throws in the places that we need to be in proximity with. So it's not just the people we need to be in proximity with, it's the places as well. And so there's just so much good stuff in this book. We've unpacked a little bit of it here in this episode. I know you're going to get a lot from it. One thing I wanted to say, we didn't have a chance to fit this into the episode, but we are going to be doing a book giveaway, maybe 2 book giveaways. I'm doing this off the cuff if you can't tell. But we're going to be doing some book giveaways, and that's either going to be on social media or on the website. And the best way to find out about it is just go to wolfandiron.com/Ken Coleman. You'll see this episode. You'll see the show notes out there, and any kind of giveaways, entry stuff that we might be doing, whether it's on social media or on the website or both. You'll find out there. And we want to get this out there into the hands of the guys because as Ken and I were talking before we actually recorded the episode, this is an area where a lot of guys we would naturally struggle with. And that is just getting people in our inner circle kind of area, right? We're drawing guys in. We're getting closer and closer to the people that we want to be like. And it goes against so much of the mentality of just the go it alone, lone wolf kind of guy out there, right? The John McClanes of the world. And that's something that I struggle with. I'm an introvert by nature, and I love just kind of doing things on my own, having my heads down and just getting to it. But that's not really where we thrive. Tribe equals thrive. That's one of the things that I talk about in the Wolf and Iron community, our online Facebook group. And your tribe needs to be very intentional. And the people that you put yourself in proximity with needs to be intentional. And so I don't want to give away too much. I want to get into the podcast here. Head over to wolfandiron.com/Ken Coleman. You can check out the show notes. You can see about any kind of book giveaways. And without further ado, here's Ken Coleman. Mr. Ken Coleman, welcome back to the Wolf and Iron podcast. So glad to have you here, man.
Mike, I've never felt more manlier than when I'm a guest on the Wolf and Iron podcast. Just to say that, I can go home tonight. Hey, babe, how was your day? And she'll tell me, and then she'll ask me, how was your day? I'll say, I was a guest on the Wolf and Iron podcast. It makes me feel a little manlier than normal, which is always a good thing.
And she'll be like, where are all these new chest hairs come from? What is this about?
Exactly. Yeah, I love it. You by far have the coolest name to any podcast I've ever been on.
Yes, that was my hope. I know a lot of guys that they name their podcasts or they name their businesses kind of on the nose, the manly podcast or the man, whatever. And there's some good marketing reasons for doing that. But I'm a writer at heart. I'm a poet at heart. And so I wanted something that just speaks to me. And so when I came across these words, the Wolf and Iron, I was like, I got to do something with that. I need to use that to help inspire men. So I'm glad that's hitting home with you.
So cool, man. Thanks for having me, though. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. And we were kind of catching up a little bit before we started the podcast officially here. I was telling you, this is exciting for me because I get a chance to talk to you, and I'm a big fan of yours, and so I admire your work. And so I listen to Entre Leadership, listen to the Ken Coleman Show, read your books, and but this probably about a year ago, actually just a little over a year ago, you and I had a conversation. So for the guys who are listening, there's a previous podcast where you can get to know Ken a little bit more. We talk about how to ask good questions and some of the Entre Leadership aspects of the things that you do, as well as the Ken Coleman Show. But about that time, you and I were recording that podcast. I was actually in my son's bedroom because he'd gone off to college, and my whole house had been taken over by this other business called Rustic in Maine. I'd just been kind of kicked out of every room until I was kind of like sequestered into this one little place that had decent acoustics, actually. But since then, the business has just grown, and we've got about 22 employees now. We're in a building. We're just doing really, really well. I've got an official office. And so it's just neat to be able to reflect back on that time and just to see all the good things that not only we've been able to do, but obviously just give God glory here as well, because there's just so much of it that we couldn't have prepared for that's just kind of come our way. And so it's just a neat circumstance to be able to talk to you once again with just new and good things happening.
Well, it's always good to visit with you. I love your business. I love the craftsmanship behind it. And it is just something that I've always enjoyed being a part of with this program. And you and I were scheming. We're going to be together in Nashville soon, so we're going to keep it going.
That's good, man. That's good. So I got you on here today to talk about your new book, The Proximity Principle. And I'll tell you what I like about this is that you've done something, it's some kind of mind-reading trick that's going on here. Because when I'm reading it, I'm flipping through it, and I'm kind of reading a section, I'm going, okay, I agree with that, but what about this? This is where my mind's already thinking about the next kind of section. Well, what about this piece, or what about that piece? And I'd flip over the page, and there it is. And the book is, you've done a really, really good job of taking some principles that I think we've probably heard before about proximity and having good people around you, but you've broken this out, and you've given us a guide to this. And so tell us the listeners here, what inspired the book, and why did you feel like this was something that you needed to write and that people needed to hear?
Yeah, the inspiration behind the book was coming up with the principle one day in the car. It was probably 10, 12 months ago, somewhere in that range, and I was driving into the office. I stopped at a stoplight, and I was looking at my very first thing on my calendar that morning, which that particular morning happened to be a podcast interview much like this. Yeah. And it was a younger guy who wanted me to be on, and so he had pre-submitted his questions and wanted to make sure that I was prepared and wanted to, speak into any of the questions. And so I was just looking it over, and the last question caught my eye, and it was basically saying, if you could summarize your success in broadcasting, having started from scratch later on in your career to move into broadcasting to get where you are now, what would be that one thing, that one key? And I remember going, man, I really appreciate the question. I think it's an impossible question to answer, And I began to reflect on it. Okay, if I'm only going to say one thing to try to honor this guy and help him out, to give some content for his listeners, what is just one thing? What would I share? What would I share? And so the light turns green. I began to roll off from the light and on my way. And somewhere in that, in the space between the next light, I just realized that it was the key for me was putting myself around the right people and in the right places. I was very good at it, identifying who the right people were, and then intentionally getting in front of them, around them. Same thing with places. And that's what helped me get some momentum and keep momentum. And so I started thinking about that. I said, well, that's a pretty good thought. I think I feel good about saying that. You know, I was good about getting around the right people in the right places. And I come up to another light, Mike, and I'll never forget it. And I stop at the light, and this thing's rattling around in my head, and I go, it was all about proximity. That thought kind of rolled in my head.
Yeah.
And I went, oh, wow. And I'm a word nerd, to be very honest with you. Like, I love words. Like, I got to be careful sometimes not to use the 50-cent word and sound, you know, like an idiot, you know, trying to sound smart. But I really love words. And so I thought, man, I haven't said proximity in a long time. I love the word. That's really what it was. It was all about proximity. So I got this one thing in my head now. And light turns green, and I've got 2 more miles or so into the office. By the time I got into the office parking lot, I had pulled my iPhone out, and I had said in the voice memo, in order to do what I want to do, I've got to be around people that are doing it and in places where it is happening.
That's good.
And I listened back to it, and I went, oh, I think that's good. That's the proximity principle. So I came into the office, and my leader is a guy named Jeremy. He's kind of like, you know, a manager would be for you know, authors or speakers, whatever. So I interrupted him. He was talking with his assistant. I said, I've got to bounce something off you. It's going to take 2 minutes. I need to know if this is good or if it's cheese.
Right.
And so I said that principle just like that.
Yeah.
And he looked at me and went, dude, that's strong. So I've got this blessing of a laboratory called the Ken Coleman Show every day, where I'm talking to real people who are calling me going, hey, I'm not where I want to be, and I need your help to get there, or I don't know where I want to be. Help me discover what that is. And so I just started using it. I don't know if I used it that day. I feel like I did, but I really used it over the next week or two, and it made sense to callers. And then people started emailing in. I had guys calling, going, hey, I used your proximity principle. And so I knew that we had something in the sense of we had some language around, you know, a tried and true idea.
Yeah.
And so that's where it started. And people began to use it and practice it. And I would teach on it. And so I knew we had something. And so when the opportunity came to put a book out, I felt like this, from a practical standpoint, has the opportunity to help people stare fear and doubt in the face. And those are the 2 enemies that I'm fighting on behalf of people, fear and doubt. And when you have clarity and confidence, because clarity breeds confidence, and then confidence breeds courage. And the proximity principle, if practiced to the point of habitual activity, it will bring opportunity your way. There's no way to not have opportunity if you're around the right people and in the right places. So the formula is the right people plus the right places equals opportunity. And so I'm excited about taking on fear and doubt and helping men and women all around the country and the world get the clarity and confidence to move forward on their path to fulfilling their purpose.
So I think this is so key, and you've actually just illuminated probably a lot of guys' minds on something that I think is really, really important. Just sharing the story, because what I heard was you were talking to somebody who wasn't, I'm guessing here, just from the way you kind of talked about the podcast, this may not be someone who has multi-million fans out there, downloads and stuff like that, but they ask a good question. It doesn't even matter if they did. They asked a good question to you.
Right.
They got your brain going, the noodle's kind of firing, right?
Yep.
So you're kind of digging in. Something's there. You come, between stoplights, you come to an idea of, it's proximity. That's got something to do with it, right? And I'm just kind of seeing this sort of flow, and hopefully you guys are listening to this, because what Ken's showing you here is how quickly and really the right way to go from concept, idea, testing the market in simple ways, and then kind of moving with it, right? And you just guys, if you didn't catch that aspect of it, go back and listen to that again, because what Ken basically did was he basically showed you this is not an impossible thing to come up with an idea, write a book, or test the market out, see if it's going to work, and get your idea out there. The same principles, even in just that little piece of discussion there, can be applied to so many things in life. I don't want to get into that because I think that's going to be really deep waters and get us off into some entrepreneurial things. But there's a lot of really, really good things there that just took place. And I think stuff that probably just comes natural to you, a lot of guys would hear that and go, wow, that's how you do it? Like, that's how things come about. And I would say the same thing about Wolf and Iron, about Rustic and Maine, about Microsoft. You'd say, it doesn't matter what it is. Things start simple. You kind of test it out. And then if it seems like it's good, you move forward.
That's exactly right. Yeah, the key takeaway there is just do it. The old Nike phrase, just do it. Just put it out there, throw it out there. Had I said the proximity principle on my radio show that day, or the next day, and nobody emailed back and nobody called in and said I'm using it, what would have been the negative?
Yeah, exactly.
Nobody. If it wasn't memorable, nobody would remember it.
Exactly.
And there would be no giant risk. There would be no, that guy's an idiot. Why does he have a radio show? No, I just threw out a concept and it stuck. And Lord willing, it's going to gain a lot of ground and obviously help a lot of people in the form of a book. But more importantly, to help people see that the journey is not as scary as it seems. I think that's the biggie. And I think we all face fear in different forms and fashions.
Something I did several months back, I've got a Truck Talk Thursday podcast kind of episodes. It's just me talking from my truck. Very simple. And I just one day I just decided to say, I'm just going to tell the guys all the things I want to do. It could be books I want to write, adventures I want to have, whatever it happens to be. And that was one of the best. I got so many good responses from that. Just asking, just really just kind of putting it out there and saying, none of these are set in stone. These are just things I have thoughts of doing, dreams and aspirations, and maybe they're good, maybe they're not. I haven't even fleshed them out, but they're just stuff that just tugs at my heart, tugs at my mind, and I want to do. And even just something like that was just so good to be able to get feedback from people because people would write in and say, I can't wait till you come out with that book, or I can't wait till you do this thing. And so even just putting your ideas out there and just getting people's feedback. Sometimes take it with a grain of salt, but that's an easy thing to do. Everybody can do that. And, when you have people telling you that's a good idea, you should pursue that, then you should probably pursue it. So,
yeah, I agree 100%.
So we talk about in the book, you talk about peoples and places, and give us an idea of some of the people that we need to get into our circle, because I think maybe this is something that maybe it came intuitively for you when you were younger or at some point. I know it's a challenge for people to even know who are the people that I need to have in my inner circle. Yeah. So give us an idea of some of those that we need to have.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked this question because I want your audience to know that I came up with the 5 people that I write about in this book long after I got into the dream job. But what I did was I went into a coffee shop one day when we first started mapping this book out. And we hadn't green-lighted it as a book yet. It was clearly working on the radio, and the principle itself is obviously simple and very, very powerful. People get it. It's easy to understand. But I went back and I sat in a coffee shop here in Franklin, Tennessee one morning for about an hour and a half. And I purposely got in a corner and stared at a wall. I would look at that wall, I'll never forget, looking at the corner of that wall and staring at the wood, and I began to play rewind on my journey, my professional journey. And that's when the 5 people just revealed themselves to me. It came very, very quickly. I was probably 15 minutes in and had all 5 people written down in my moleskin because they were from my journey. And so the 5 people in the book, I'll just touch on 2, but I'll list them out real quick. And this is no particular order as to how and to when, but these are the 5 people we unveil in the book. You've got the professor, you've got the producer, you've got the professional, you've got the peer, and the mentor. And these were the 5 people that just flowed from my mind as I went back, and I said, who did I get around? And I began to give them those names. And if there was a P word for mentor, I would have put it in there, but I couldn't come up with it. It killed me. That's the only thing I agonized on in this book. But I'll tell you about, I'll pick 2. I'll tell you about the professor, and I'll tell you about the peer. The reason I picked the professor is I think most of your audience right now is going, okay, well, that's the college professor. It's somebody who's in a classroom. Not necessarily. The professor is defined in the book, and I'm going to define it in your journey as someone who can teach you what you need to know and how to do it, and then someone who's willing to do it. So there's three distinctions there. They can teach you what you need to know, okay, and show you how to do it. So you got knowledge, and then you got practicing, and then they want to. They have a desire to teach. Not everybody who has the first two is willing to do the third, meaning they know how, they know the knowledge, and then they can demonstrate, but they're not willing to. And so in my situation, Mike, I was 32, almost 33 years of age, and took a broadcasting school, a 6-week broadcasting school, and I took over the local producer. Now, you'll recall that one of the people in the book is a producer. But in the book, Jeff Batten is the example of my professor because he created this broadcasting school as an entrepreneurial venture, thought he could make some extra money teaching people the skills to be able to perform in front of the camera and behind the camera. So think everything television production. He knew it. He could teach it because he was an actual television producer.
Yeah.
But he was my professor, and it had nothing to do with going to college. It's just I knew that I needed to learn some basics, the fundamentals, and there were multiple people who could teach it, but that's where I ended up. So the professor is somebody who can teach you what you need to know, show you how to do what you need to do, and they're willing to actually instruct. The peer, I think, is pretty obvious, but what most men and women aren't intentional about are the people they actually hang around with. Now, there are, as you know, in the book, I talk about the environmental peers and the intentional peers. Your environmental peers are people that you are at work with, so they're part of your environment every day. You maybe go to church with them, maybe you see them at the golf club or at the gym, but they are a part of your natural rhythm, and they're in the environment, and so that's why they're part of the rhythm. So they're just around you all the time, and so you're talking to them, and so you're kind of hanging with them. The intentional peers are the people that you're spending time with on purpose. So it's not a part of your natural rhythm, but you're intentional to say, hey, let's get together, let's go on a double date, let's play golf Saturday. These are the intentionals. You're going out of your way to schedule time to be with them. And whether it's environmental or intentional, you need to make sure that you guard your time and guard your focus with who you're spending time with, because we are, this has been said, Jim Rohn kind of made it famous, Charlie Tremendous Jones talked about this concept, that the people you hang out with have a massive impact on your life. And so are the people you're hanging out with, are they lifting you? Are they cheering you? Are they challenging you? Or are they holding you back or dragging you down, whether intentionally or not intentionally? And so those are, two examples. Again, I'll go wherever you want to go here. But there are those 5 people and then the 5 places. Very important that as you're making the moves to fulfill your purpose, this is professional pursuit, you've got to make sure that you're in proximity to the right people and the right places, because that's where opportunity to learn, opportunity to do, and opportunity to connect exists. It's all about proximity. And if you're learning and doing and connecting intentionally every day, there's no holding you back. Opportunity will knock your door down at times.
So when I'm listening to this, here's what I think a lot of guys are hearing, especially about the peer relationship. They're probably thinking, okay, they're kind of going through their mind of who their peers are and the people that they see, and most of them are the kind of unintentional peers. These are just the people that are acquaintances, the people that you run into everyday life, and they know that they need to elevate the peer status, right? They need to have a lot more intentional peers and spending more time with the intentional people that are like-minded than they are with just Joe coworker. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, I think guys are stuck in a couple of different ways. And I don't think this is immovable, but I think they get stuck thinking one of two things. One, I don't know anybody outside of my circle to connect with. Or two, I don't think I belong in an elevated peer relationship. Meaning, there's some people that I see maybe in church that I know have probably a better mindset than just some of the people that I'm hanging out with from work. But I don't know if I belong in that group. And I think that's holding a lot of guys back. And I think that it's a false belief, but I don't know if you have any thoughts on that for the guys.
Well, yeah, because I think that what's at play there in that scenario is we've got doubt, and so doubt is I don't belong. They're not going to accept me. They don't want to go to the next level. They don't want to invest in people like me, or they don't think that I've got any value. So you've got doubt there, and the doubt comes from insecurity. Am I good enough? There's two core things that every human being really wants the answer to. Am I loved? And am I good enough to perform? Can I do it? Do I have what it takes? So, that's a situation that is, again, an excuse for a lot of guys. I can't get over there. I don't know them well enough. There's always an excuse, and the excuse is there as a form of protection from whatever the fear or the doubt is. And so, excuses are, again, they are really the anchor that holds so many people down. There's something that's rooted in the excuses, but the excuse itself seems to make a lot of sense. And it's practical, and it's safe, or it's smart. And so we talk ourselves into the excuse because it seems to make so much sense. Let me give you another example of one of the people in the book that most people don't think about, because this addresses what we're talking about here, which is fear. Like, I can't get there, I'm dealing with, doubts or, whatever. The professional. So the professional is the person who is at the top of their field, and to the point that they're very, very successful and probably very well known, meaning it's a long shot to a miracle somewhere in there that you would get a chance to get in proximity to them, you think.
Sure.
Except for you realize, Mike, and you know this, I think you've heard my story, that I learned how to do interviews, which got me into the broadcasting industry. I built my reputation as an interviewer. I learned how to do interviews not in college, not in the broadcasting school I talked about. I learned to do interviews by watching Larry King Live and Bob Costas, two guys that I could watch on TV and YouTube. And I've watched every Larry King episode there is. My wife bought me the DVD set, if you can believe that. I'm probably one of very few people who still has that at home, and I watched him and I studied how he did interviews. I pointed out things that I liked, things I didn't like, things that I would do differently. I'd ask myself questions. Why did he do it that way? Was it intentional, or is it just, all these things? And I did the same thing with Costas. And my point is this. I got in close proximity to people that were at the top of their field, the field that I wanted to be in, broadcasting. And I never had to say hi to them. I never had to do a cold call or reach out to them or get rejected. I got in proximity by watching them do their thing. And books still exist. YouTube still exists. Podcasts are ubiquitous. They're everywhere. And so if you can't learn from the people that are at the top of your desired field, then you've got your head in the sand. And so proximity doesn't always have to be in person. So I want, what I'm doing here is fighting that excuse, fighting the fear, the doubt. It's too late. My ship has sailed, or I'm going to fail. There's no way for me to ever learn what I need to learn. That's just a bunch of garbage.
So when I'm listening to this, here's what I hear that I think is good to point out, in that when we talk about the proximity principle, sometimes we're trying to get in proximity with people who are elevated from a place of where we are currently, because we want to get to a certain position. But what I hear you talking about is really having a strong passion for the craft, whatever the craft happens to be, whatever the thing is that you want to be doing. And from your perspective, did you have, I think I know the answer to this, but I want to hear your answer. Did you have more of a passion for the craft itself, or did you have a passion and a strong desire for the status that could be gained from mastering the craft?
Oh, the craft itself. And I think that's what it needs to be. I think the work itself has got to mean very much to you. So what I teach on my radio show and in my books and in my speeches is your sweet spot is at the intersection of your greatest talent and greatest passion. In other words, you use what you do best, that's talent and skills, to do what you love to do most. That's the passion. So I get great joy out of broadcasting. Well, is it really broadcasting, or is it I get great joy out of performing? Well, if you break it down further, it's actually the pressure of performing. So I love speaking in front of a crowd as much as I do doing my as my radio show. I love being on TV. I'll be flying to New York Wednesday afternoon to do some media in New York, and I love being on TV, being a guest, and the pressure on for me to deliver some value-added content. So it doesn't matter what venue or platform that I'm having to perform. I love that pressure of performing, but it's not just performing, it's performing to help people live their best life, to be who they're supposed to be. So there's the specificity of my work.
Yeah.
So you love handcrafting, you love creating, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But you could do that in a lot of different ways. But the one that you've chosen is the craft of, obviously some custom jewelry. And so you need to love the craft, the act of creating in your situation, or in my situation, the act of performing. And there's a little bit of creating, because I'm creating content all the time. But you got to love that craft. Not loving you'll learn, but it's not about loving learning. It's, do you love the craft enough to do whatever it takes to be great at it, so that the result of your work, which is what you really are passionate about. Like at the end of the day, I love broadcasting and performing, but if I was doing sports talk radio or sports TV, I wouldn't have the same passion for the results as I do when I talk to men and women and we get off the phone and I know that I gave them some clear direction to be who they're supposed to be. And not only are they clear, but they're confident. And that's when I lay my head down at the end of the night and I go, that's work that matters deeply to me.
And I think that's so important to call out, because I think a lot of guys have tried to make connections. And, for the guys who are in this spot where they've tried to reach out, they try to make connections, we can sense, people can sense when you want the position more than you actually care about the thing itself, the craft itself. And so if you're trying to connect to that professor and you go to that professor and you say, I want to make $1 million and I want to have this status and I want to have so many followers and I want to have whatever kind of influence, it just comes across all wrong in most industries. And I think people can smell that out. And so I think that you need to find a passion for, like you said, for the craft itself, because then when you make those connections, people say, oh, here's somebody who loves it. Here's somebody who really wants to be a part of this and has a passion for it beyond just, the success or the fame that might come from it or the extra money that might come from a leveling up in their career or whatever. And I think when people see that, well, man, that makes everybody excited. Everybody wants to be for that guy, right? And so I think
I want to buy products from people that feel that way about their products.
Exactly. Exactly.
I want to render services from people who are passionate about their service, that they love it. I think everybody, it's the idea of a flame. You see a flame burning brightly, you're attracted to it. Can't take your eyes off of it. And so that love of the craft and the love of the results of the craft, that's the combo. You gotta love doing it, but you gotta love the results as much as you love the actual craft. And when you're there, so it's really, my formula is talent, passion, values, meaning I'm using what I do best, talent, to do what I love to do most, passion, to see the results that matter most to me. That's when you're like walking around like a tuning fork. You know what I mean? You're just on.
Yeah. No, it's great. I mean, when you're working in your zone like that, it's like you're moving 100 miles an hour, with little effort, right? Because you love it. It's just it's flowing through you. And then other people sense that. And I think one of the things that you call out in the book that's so good is showing up with this attitude of, I want to help out. How can I pitch in? Show me how I can help you. Just put me wherever I can be of service, right? To that professional, or maybe even to the peers, to put yourself in a place where you're learning. You're just part of it. You just want to be surrounded by whatever it happens to be. Tell us a little bit about why that's so important, to show up with that kind of attitude versus just give me. Just let me, give me a handout, give me a favor.
Yeah, well, you said it right there. Nobody's excited about giving you a handout, but people get very excited about helping you up. Big difference. When you sit down, so this is all about proximity. So the entire book is about getting around the right people in the right places. When you're there, you better be humble with a massive dose of gratitude. So I'm no big shot. I'm not God's gift to the planet. I'm humble. I'm here because I'm here to learn, and I know that I can't do it on my own. And I am really grateful to be around you, or I am really grateful to be here. So we've got humility and gratitude they are very important. That's your left hand, right hand focus. That's your entire attitude is humility and gratitude. And then when you are intentional with that humility and gratitude, so you'll say you're sitting with somebody that you know has the opportunity to probably open several doors for you, or certainly one door, but you don't ask them for anything other than their knowledge and wisdom. Hey, I got to tell you, I don't even belong in the room. Really thrilled to be in the room. Thank you. I have got some prepared questions, and I know your time is extremely valuable, and I'm really grateful for it. So I want to get your thoughts here because I think I want to do what you want to do. I want to be in your space, and you're a high performer. So here are my questions. And that humility and gratitude turns into this insatiable curiosity.
Yeah.
And they see that you are there to actually learn from them instead of you're there to impress them. Big difference. And so they may not open a door for you that day. They may never open a door for you. But I rarely see that situation where they don't at least help in some way. They make a connection. Who knows? So they may not hire you, but they're going to help you in some way, if nothing else, by actually being transparent with you and dispensing some knowledge and wisdom with you in that moment. Don't overlook that meeting. Yeah. That is the help that they'll give you. They are helping you by actually spending time with you and answering your questions. So to answer your question, Mike, it is humility, and it is gratitude, and it is curiosity. And I'd throw that, the curiosity is in the form of you've prepared your curiosity. When you're with them, you know exactly what you're going to ask because you're not going to waste their time. And people are attracted to that. They're attracted to that desire to learn.
That's absolutely right. Absolutely right. So when I'm thinking about proximity, one of the questions that comes to mind is how does virtual proximity kind of play a part in this, or social media proximity? So I think, you and I talked about getting together in Nashville. That'd be awesome. I want to do that. That's going to happen. But what about virtual proximity? Is that as effective? Okay, so it does work. And is that something people should be shooting for as kind of like a first line, or just kind of take what they can get? How does that work within the dynamic of the proximity principle?
Well, I think it's a part of the strategy of proximity. It's not the be-all, end-all. It's not the silver bullet. But certainly in 2019, the world is very, very flat because of social media and the internet. So let's go back to the example of the professional. Like I talked about Larry King and Bob Costas. I got in proximity to those guys, and I was sitting in my athletic shorts and flip-flops, on my back patio, and I was in proximity via YouTube. Well, the same principle applies on social media. So, for instance, you pick a thought leader, or you pick somebody in an industry that you're in, and if they've got a successful company, that company probably has an Instagram account or a Twitter account or a Facebook page or all three, YouTube channel. Same exact principle. You can get in proximity to them by just simply observing them and modeling what they're doing, consuming everything they do. So that is proximity. Now, the other way to get in proximity via social media is, you can try to reach out to them and tag them in a post saying, hey, I love their work. When I grow up, I want to be like, you know what I mean? And maybe they respond to you, maybe they don't. But again, even if they respond to you, it's going to be more of an attaboy. Maybe they notice your stuff and give you a shout out. But so it's not so much about building a relationship on social media, but it is about treating social media as a place to learn. It's one of the 5 places. So you can learn a lot just by following high performers in your field that are doing what you want to do. By following them on social media, you're getting a window into a lot of their success.
That's good, and that's a good transition too into the places aspect of this, because this was one thing that I didn't think about in terms of proximity of places, and you've laid these out really, really well. Give us an idea of when we talk about the places to be in proximity. What are we talking about here?
Well, you start off with my favorite place in the book, because it's the place that most people overlook. And that was why we put it in first in order, and that is where you are. Where you are is the first place that you need to be head on a swivel, paying attention to how you can get started where you are. In fact, you know this, Mike. I came up with the law of the zip code, and we unveil it in this chapter. And the law of the zip code says this. I was getting ready to say the proximity principle. Can you tell I'm on message? The law of the zip code says everything you need to get started is already around you. So the way I've been saying it recently is you don't need to move somewhere to go somewhere. You don't have to pick up and move across the country or move anywhere necessarily to get started. Now, there might be a time where you do have to make some type of move for the next level of the work. But it is not necessarily a guarantee that you got to do that when you start. And so before you consider a move, I want you to consider the law of the zip code. Where can I get that's already in my zip code? So for me, I already had a broadcasting school 15 miles from my house. Who are the people that I need to know that are in my zip code? People that are the producers, people that are professors, people that are peers, people that are mentors. Who's around me? And so you need to start where you are. And so many people get scared to death of the climb. They're looking at the top of Mount Everest instead of going, there is no top of Mount Everest if I don't actually get out there and actually start training my lungs, training my body for the climb, learning techniques, things of that nature. I can do all that right where I am. It has nothing to do with getting to Mount Everest to learn how to climb. Nobody does that. Nobody goes to Mount Everest until they're trained and they've been instructed and they're ready to go. So the same thing in your career. So that first place, where you are is really huge. Then we got to get to a place to learn. This is, again, ties very nicely in with the professor. I'm going to get somewhere where I can actually learn what I want to do. And then we go to a place to practice. This is low pressure. So early on in my career, I was volunteering my time, one for a sports talk radio station, another for a television sports network that was a 12-state regional cable network. I volunteered so that I could get in and do some stuff, but it wasn't my livelihood, and I wasn't trying to audition for a job. It was just helping out, doing a little bit of broadcasting here and there, but it was a place to practice. This is low pressure, and then ultimately you've got to get to a place to perform. This is now moving from practicing low pressure to maybe I'm launching a side hustle, or maybe I'm actually switching careers and I'm entry level or a little bit lower than maybe that I thought that I would get and that I want to be, but I know I need to get in this year. So a place to perform. Now we're talking pressure. And then finally a place to grow. This is as you're moving up the ladder. You want to be in a place where you are constantly pushed and challenged, because when you're pushed and challenged, that's where growth happens. And there's a two-sided play here to a place to grow. A place to grow is forcing me to grow because I'm pushed and challenged, but also there is a ladder where I am. So I haven't hit my lid. I'm able to see a path forward, or I can see the rungs above me. And so that's a quick rundown of the places.
That's really good. And what I like about this is that it's really a call to intentionality. So, we talk a lot about getting a vision for your life here on the Wolf and Iron podcast. And once you guys have this vision, you kind of know the man you want to be. Maybe this is related to your career. Maybe it's related to a business ambition or in your life as a father, as a leader, as a husband. Once you get that vision, now you've got to put some intentionality behind it. And I think that what you're talking about, this proximity principle, can be used in all facets of a man's life. I want to be a better father. Let me go find some guys who can teach me some things, right? Let me go elevate my peers out there so I'm learning from guys that I'm seeing do these things. And let me get into places where I can make things happen, where I can be intentional. And, just like you had the example of going to the coffee shop and just mapping out the people, right? Just staring at that blank wall. I think we all need some blank wall time like that. And we don't take it often enough. We need to get in front of that, go to that coffee shop, sit in front of that blank wall and say, I see the man I want to be. I got some vision of who he is. Let me start writing out a list of the people that I know that fit in these categories, or question marks by the places where I don't know anybody who fits in these categories or these places, and start putting some intentionality behind that. So just as we're kind of wrapping up here, one of the things that I wanted to end on was this idea that, I'm a Christian, you're a Christian, and there's probably, as guys are going through and they're kind of laying out their list of people that they want to know and getting connected with, places they want to be, there's going to be a lot of question marks there. And I think that there's an aspect of this, which is just having a belief that God is going to lead you towards and this isn't a prosperity gospel, it's not what I'm talking about, but that if you are intentional about becoming a godly kind of man, once again, this can relate to your career, this can relate to your business, that God's going to put you in front of the people that you need to get in front of. And it might not be the people that you initially had on your list. And I think you've got to trust that. And I just want to ask you, just kind of, as we're wrapping up here, if you had any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're saying, but the way that I would put it and the challenge I'd put before your audience is if you're a person of faith and a man who wants to be who God created you to be, I think you have to step out in faith a lot, very consistently. And so this proximity principle, you could take this book and turn it into a devotional if you really wanted to and say, am I putting myself around the people that God wants me to be in front of and in the places where God wants me to be? You know, this is not just a vocational principle. This is certainly a spiritual principle. And the whole book is a book of action. So I would tell you that I don't know that God is necessarily going to put you anywhere unless you have already stepped out. So my theology says what Hebrews says, and it's pretty simple. Without faith, it is impossible to please God.
That's good.
Impossible. And the reason is if God just grabs us by the shoulder, like I do my kids when I'm walking them, you know, on pin the tail on the donkey or whatever, I'm kind of placing them in a general direction so they can launch forward and get close to the donkey. If God did that for us, there would be no reason for faith. But when we put ourselves in proximity, we really assess, you know, our talent, our passion. We get a good idea what that sweet spot is. That stuff is written on our heart. And then we say, okay, God, thank you for that clarity. Thank you for creating me to be this guy. Now, I got to step out in faith. And the way I do that is I've given you a practical manual on how to actually step out in faith. And when you get around those people and in those places, then God says, okay, now I'm going to step in and I'm going to bless and I'm going to open up more doors where you can meet the right people and step into the right places. But it is only after we step out and continue to step. So proximity itself is an act of faith. Putting myself into proximity is how you act, and then God honors.
Well, excellent point, and a great way to wrap up here. Ken, I really do appreciate you being on the podcast. Great conversation as always. And guys, go check out the Proximity Principle. We've just kind of scratched the surface of the book here, and I know this is something you're going to want to dig into. Ken, once again, I really appreciate it.
Mike, always good being with you. Thanks for having me on.
You bet. Well, there you have it, men. I'd love to know what you thought about the episode. Feel free to reach out to me on any of my social media networks. And look, if you got something out of this, make sure another guy does too. Share the episode and make sure it gets in front of the guys that need to hear it the most. Until next time, keep your powder dry, and may a fair wind be always in your sails.